Good job.
It's tax day, we have to do that.
Closed session has been canceled for today's meeting, so we'll move on to item 2, which is approval of the regular meeting. Do any board members wish to add, subtract, delete anything from the agenda?
Move the agenda as amended.
Okay. Don, you're okay with that?
Yes.
Okay. Very good. This is an opportunity for the public to comment on non-agenda items. And if you just raise your hand, if I have people here that wish to comment, have one. Anyone else? Okay. If you'd come forward, state your name and who you represent. And
my name is Vijay Kumar. I'm a Davis resident, and I'm speaking as a private citizen. I'm here to share briefly about my opinion of this RANI type collector. I think there was a discussion 2 months back about the RANI type collector. I'm sorry I couldn't attend that meeting, so I saw the minutes. I want to briefly share my opinion about that. There were some discussions whether that type of facility is suitable for this project. In my opinion, it is not because of the size of the project. I have seen small projects, 1 to 2 million gallons a day you can extract, but for this large project, it's not feasible or suitable. Second item is this RANI collector depends on the ground. It's suitable when you have sand or permeable ground where the water goes down and comes out of a tube. Here we have yellow clay. When I tried to dig a trench for my wife's plant garden, it took me 2 hours to dig through 6 inches. So with that kind of clay, it's not suitable for the water to go through and collect into the RANI collector. So there were discussions 2 months back on the meetings. So based on what I have seen, it's not suitable for us. And based on that, what West Coast is doing is ideal in eliminating that option for this facility.
thank you. All right, there's an opportunity for the board or the staff to comment on items. Steve, do you have anything you'd like to bring up?
No, I do not.
Don, do you have anything? Marty, do you have anything? I'd like to bring up just 2 things. First of all, on Monday, Mayor Davies and I and 2 of the Woodland Public Works Department members had a meeting with the Regional Water Control, with officials at the Regional Water Control Board. We met with Ken Landau, Assistant Executive Officer, Rudy Schnagel, who is their CV salt specialist, and Diana Messina, who writes the permits, including, I believe, Davis and Woodland. We had a lengthy discussion with them, and I think it was a worthwhile discussion about making sure that we were doing what we absolutely had to do in relation to procuring river water to satisfy the discharge permits. And they let us know, I think, pretty clearly that we really do have no alternative but to continue to work as we're working or find a reverse osmosis technique, as we've discussed before. I think the meeting was helpful to me just to satisfy myself that this costly project has no viable alternative. And I think it was also good because it helped us establish a little bit of a relationship as elected officials with some of the key people at the regional board. And it was a good meeting. Also like to let fellow board members know that on the Cap to Cap trip, I will be one of the team leaders for the Water Resources team, and we will be discussing this project in the meetings that we have, along with the other regional concerns. The last thing I'd like to announce is that on May the 17th, the WRA will be sponsoring a forum which will address issues associated with both the Delta and with the bond package and with the Delta legislation. So we'd certainly invite anyone here that would like to be in attendance at that meeting. We anticipate it starting at 3:30 in the afternoon on that day at the Woodland Community Center. May the 17th.
It's a Monday.
All right. Anything else from staff? Greg?
Yes, at our last meeting, you approved Lynn Ann Melhalf coming on board, and I neglected to speak up at that time and express our appreciation for Nancy Cowan and her job as the interim secretary. She brought a level of expertise and professionalism that really bridged us between Donna from the WRA and Lynn Ann coming on board, and just wanted to express staff's appreciation for the effort and the work and the dedication that she put in for the agency. Unfortunately, she couldn't be here today. We had planned for her to be here, but she's out of town.
Can you draft a little note that we could sign to send to her?
I'll be happy to do that.
Great. All right, we have a consent agenda in front of us, and I do have a question on the minutes. Don't know if anybody else does. I'll defer to anyone else if they do first. On item number 7 in the minutes, and I'm sorry I didn't get time to email you this, so you wouldn't have had to deal with it here. I think that last paragraph, 7A, is a little unclear, where it what we were trying to say, I think, in that discussion was that if an application doesn't fit within the RFP approach and an outside agency handling the employment issues, that we would look perhaps to the City of Davis and the City of Woodland to handle the employment. Not that we would look to the City of Davis or the City of Woodland to hire someone, which is the way it's stated. So I would just recommend that correction be made.
Move approval with that correction.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. All right, we're at the agency general manager progress update.
Good afternoon, agency board members. I'm Dick Donnelly, Deputy Director of Public Works for the City of Woodland. As of last meeting, I think I explained that we had at that time about 5 applicants for the general manager position. And I also expressed that we were likely to end up with an influx at the end, and we did. We ended up with a total of 16 applicants, which was a good response, and a lot of really highly qualified applicants to boot. In evaluating those, we had a mini team evaluating those candidates. 6 of them turned out to be ones that we felt should no longer be considered. Some of them were people who had just fired off a resume, for instance, via email versus responding to the request for the proposal. So they were non-responsive to the RFP, basically. 5 of those were. The sixth candidate that we felt should be eliminated from consideration actually was a highly qualified individual who had submitted a proposal to share time between his current general manager position down in Groveland for a community services district down there, and for the agency to contract with him to do his other half-time up here. And it was a very interesting proposal based on his qualifications and the fact that we only initially need a half-time person, we feel. But in looking closer, we felt like that wasn't in the best interest of the agency because, well, several reasons. He was proposing to do primarily telecommuting. And we felt like we needed a whole lot more face-to-face and ad hoc on these issues. For another reason, we felt that there would probably be a lot of conflict between their district and this agency's needs in the same time frames when we needed for instance, a fiscal year budget put out. They would be dealing with the same issues, and there'd be a conflict for that person's time. So we recommended that one for elimination. Our agency hiring committee concurred with that via email. And I went ahead and set out those 6 notices, and so now we're down to 10 candidates. We felt out of the 10 remaining candidates, there were 4 that really stood out among the others. And so we have responded to the 10 candidates and asked them to provide specific references. In our mini committee, we decided we'd like references specifically from a superior, a peer, and a subordinate level, 2 from each, for them to submit. And we also built questions for checking those references, and we've got some expert HR support helping us in that regard. I'm not here. Helping us in that regard. So we've got reference questions being built, and we're collecting those as we speak. They're coming in via email typically to me. I had outlined a schedule in this report that reflected pretty much the same schedule that I had anticipated from the beginning, but in reflection on that with our HR person, who fed back to me that getting these references lined up and all of that is a whole lot easier said than done, and that this timeline is probably more likely going to end up skipping a month, meaning looking more like a final board selection in June versus May, June meeting, and scheduling those interviews between now and then, as well as all the reference checks. And all of that, of course, will be filtered through our hiring committee, which is board members Marble and Souza. And that's all I have to report today. Are there any questions?
Questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
6B, Mr. Shanahan.
Good afternoon. This item relates to a proposal that the board approved back in December or January thereabouts to solicit proposals from law firms to provide specialized construction law services. There's a staff report in front of you that outlines the purpose of this additional law firm and the process that we went through. We did go through an RFP process to select pre-selected firms. We sent out 12 RFPs. We got back 8 proposals. Staff then spent time evaluating the proposals along a principal criterion of experience with design build and design build operate. Those are alternative construction methods from the normal public works design, then bid, then construct format that you may be more familiar with your cities. For this particular project, our preliminary analysis suggests that a design build, or even more particularly a design build operate, where you fold all those functions into a single contract, may be most desirable, especially for this agency that currently has no utility type staff that could step in and start operating a major water treatment plant. So we really wanted to focus on looking at that design build operate experience. In focusing on that principal criterion, one of the 8 proposals just clearly floated to the top. When we initially started this proposal, it was suggested to me that there was this firm in New York that I'd never heard of that we ought to send a proposal to. My initial inkling as a California lawyer who doesn't like the Yankees or anything was, well, we're not going to hire a lawyer from New York. You got to be kidding me. But I was proven mistaken. This firm, Hawkins, Delafield & Wood, does indeed have a tremendous level of experience in the field of design build operate of water and wastewater projects throughout the country, and including many projects in the state of California. There are firms in California that have some design build experience, but just on balance, relative levels of experience, the Hawkins Delafield firm has much more experience. One of the issues with that firm is that the principal lawyers involved would be New York lawyers. They would not be California lawyers. Their usual format in working for major California public agencies is that they work directly through the in-house general counsel or city attorney or county counsel. Here with your agency, a small startup, you have no in-house attorney, and it would not be appropriate for this law firm to contract directly with the agency because they're not a licensed California lawyer. So the proposal that staff has brought to you is that the Hawkins Delafield firm would be retained under a subcontract to my firm, Barkowitz, Cronick and Shanahan, and they would provide assistance essentially to us and the agency staff under our license to practice in the state. And that's a format that's acceptable to the Hawkins Delafield firm. The principal purpose of, or the principal role of these guys would be to assist with document preparation. These are very complex documents involving a major set of construction documents, requests for qualifications, requests for proposals, construction contract documents, many parts of those documents, the preparation and negotiation of those, and it's a very specialized level of work that this particular firm and the principal individual, Eric Peterson in particular, has substantial experience. So it's for that reason that we are recommending that firm. Yesterday, you have before you, we received a letter from one of the other proponents, Best and Krieger, which is a California-based law firm with offices throughout the state. It's also the firm that provides city attorney services to the city of Woodland, and that letter urges the agency to carefully, consider their firm against the staff recommendation of Hawkins Delafield. In response to the letter we received from Best and Krieger, I thought it was appropriate then to expand on the staff report to further explain the reasons for just kind of focusing on between Hawkins Delafield and Best and Krieger, why we selected Hawkins Delafield. And I set before you this proposal that has a one-page table just kind of comparing some of the key aspects of the two firms, and then the attachments show the pages from the proposals outlining the relative levels of experience. And you'll note that there's 3 pages in here from the Best and Krieger proposal, and then several pages of tremendous experience that this Hawkins Delafield firm has, and it's primarily, that's the primary reason why we are favoring this firm, because they have so much more experience than any other firm that we've been able to find, including any California firm. So with that, I could go into this in more detail, but I think I'll pause here to see if you have any questions. Additionally, the letter from Best and Krieger indicated that they may have somebody here to speak on this, so before the board takes any action, you should check to see if there's anybody here from Best and Krieger who would like to comment on this matter. Questions?
Don, do you have questions?
I have
At this
questions.
point?
Do we want to hear from the BBK?
Why don't we see if we have some preliminary questions? We will hear from BB&K, and then we'll bring it back to this
All right,
group.
then I do have
Okay.
a question. So clearly the Hawkins Delafield list of experience in relevant projects, water and wastewater through several states, is extensive. Did BBK provide just a sampling or snapshot of their experience, or is this a matter of one of them writes a better proposal than the other?
It's hard to say. The RFP that went out stressed that we were looking for a list of public works projects that were design, build, operate, and details with those projects. So I have no personal, and so on that basis, what the proponents provided to us and is what we have to rely on. I am not familiar whether there's a whole litany of other projects that Best and Krieger has been involved in outside their proposal. And if there's somebody here, they can add to that. The proposal, for example, had 2 projects highlighted. Then the letter that came in yesterday had several others that were listed, but still on balance, they were not as substantial as the Hawkins Delafield firm. And also, there was more of a tendency to have there was a lot of school projects, and school projects are different than wastewater projects. So this project is does have some unique attributes. Hawkins Delafield also, for example, has done several river intake projects, which are unusual beasts to try to get constructed. And we're going to be building one of those as well, and I don't believe BB&K has any experience doing the intake type projects.
Okay, UCLA has a lot more expertise as an institution than Occidental College, and can put together a tremendous list of projects that their faculty are involved in, but you may never see a faculty member. Would the people involved in the projects that are listed for Hawkins Delafield actually be the people involved in our project?
Yes, there's a fellow there, Eric Peterson, who, in his words, he has just carved himself a niche in this particular field, and this is what he does. And he would be, the principal attorney involved on putting together the contract documents. He certainly would be supported by others in his office, but he would be the guy taking the lead, and in experiences with other projects, checking on him on a San Diego project, a very similar project for San Diego County Water Authority he was involved in. He was instrumental. And then West Yost, the project engineers here, has prior experience with Mr. Peterson on other jobs where Mr. Peterson was directly involved and clearly on the man on the job.
Is it a difference between somebody who is competent and expert versus somebody who is world-renowned, and would the competent and expert be sufficient for what we're doing?
I don't think so, and the reason being is the principal advantage of hiring Hawkins Delafield is the wealth of sample documents that they can pull off the shelf and work from, because they have prepared so many of these documents that they've got substantial wealth of the actual documents available and experience about what can go right and what can go wrong in this type of project.
Why is there a difference in the hourly rate that appears to be substantial? There's a $310 versus $370.
That's just it's hard to say. For a New York lawyer, $370 an hour is actually low. It's a blended rate for that firm for all lawyers, and it's high to me, but for the work, it's in the market. 310 is low, and 310, frankly, is a better rate, and it's really just it's a medium-sized California firm versus a large New York firm, and the New York firms are generally going to have the higher rate. Staff believes that, on balance, that we would be positive on the money side, because there would, because of Hawkins Delafield's familiarity with these types of projects and the documents, they would be more efficient in putting the documents together and structuring the transaction.
Thank you.
Marty?
Yeah, thank you. I guess my one question, well, a couple of them, but one mainly was the difference in rates, and I don't have a work program here, so I don't know, is that going to be significant over the life of this project? Do you have any idea what the amount's going to amount to? Did you on the proposals, were there like bottom line amounts for BBK and Hawkins, and what's the difference?
No, there were no bottom line amounts, because the scope of work, if you will be developed over time at the direction of agency staff. And when if the agency board, hires an attorney, one of the first things we would do in working with that attorney would be to work with them on developing a scope of work and a budget for moving forward. There's an amount in the proposed 2010-11 budget for this work, which I should have brought that with me. Anybody have that with them? Okay, which, as I recall, is in the $80,000 to $100,000 range. So the fee, it is a substantial contract, and it will be a multi-year contract in that ballpark per year.
Okay, so then really these differences in rates are sort of anecdotal, unless we know that this is a unit rate, but we don't really know what the units are at this point.
Right, because it's, when you're dealing with hourly rates for billing, for attorneys, that's obviously a key factor when retaining an attorney, but it should not be, you never want to hire an attorney, in my view, based on low bid, because especially for a project like this, experience is paramount. This is a complicated, very expensive project, and agency staff's thought is to go out and find the best, the best attorney who does this kind of work. And this attorney, more than anybody else, has done very similar projects to yours in San Diego, Seattle, Phoenix, major water infrastructure projects.
Yeah, I've been looking at it.
Okay.
They're all over the country, and certainly the size of the projects are well within the range of what we're proposing. So,
And Mr. Meyer just handed me the draft budget moving forward for this job, and we have plugged in for the next fiscal year $110,000, and for fiscal year 11-12, $165,000. Those are preliminary numbers, but it gives you the order of magnitude that we're looking at.
the contract terms just caught my eye. These are 20-year contracts, some of them. 10-year
When they
contracts.
talk about the 20-year contracts, those are usually what these referring to is the operate term of the contract. It's a design, build, operate, and then as part of the DBO contract, the contractor would agree to operate the facility for a certain period of time.
I'm assuming you don't need a construction attorney at that point.
Correct. This attorney would serve principally from now until you let a construction, a DBO contract. At that point, then, in large part, this person's services would be done. And if there, and that's a good point, if at that point, once you get into construction, there are things in the nature of construction claims and the need for dispute resolution and whatnot, at that point, then we would probably recommend to the agency board that if you need a construction counsel for that type of work, that you would hire a local construction attorney to handle claims that might come in under a contract that's already been finalized and approved.
So one last question, and this company's or this council's main purpose is to develop the bid documents.
The bid, yes, the bid and construction documents, and to negotiate with the selected team and to advise agency staff in those efforts.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Shanahan, you will serve as if we hire the New York firm, you would serve as the main contractor, and they would be the subcontractor. Is there any cost for you being the primary contractor?
Yes, there would be an additional level of effort on my part to oversee Mr. Peterson and his work. Unfortunately, it's difficult for me to get my arms around the scope of that. Mostly my principal role will be that when Mr. Peterson comes to the board with a set of documents and says, okay, these documents are good to go and I recommend the board adopt them, at that point then I need to be familiar with those documents, review them, and be able to advise the board that yes, he's right, these documents are adequate. So there will be a few hours involved when items come to the board. That'll be kind of my principal interface is as we come to the board.
So that means that adds to the hourly rate of the firm if you were to spread that over the entire hours that would be contracted through both you
Right.
and the subcontractor.
Yes, and we talked about that at the agency staff level, and still believe that with this fellow's level of experience and documents on the shelf, that on balance you'd be money ahead.
Now, I noticed that they've completed 16 projects in California. 10 of them were water projects. One of them was a 75 MGD water plant down in Stockton. And my question is, did they deal within the same framework as your state? And here we would be dealing with them because they aren't licensed in the state of California?
Well, yes, even though they aren't licensed in the state of California, they have done several major California jobs, so they're familiar with our California Public Contracts Code and some of the unique attributes of design, build, operate in California. California is one of the most sort of least friendly states to design, build, operate. It's more accepted in other parts of the country than it is here, and he's familiar with the restrictions in California on DB and DBO projects.
And that would then bring me to a similar query that Mayor Pro Tem Saylor put forward, is the experience that BBK has in wastewater and more precisely water projects. That is a concern to me and would be out. If that experience doesn't exist, I would incur a higher cost to be certain that we have the best and the brightest capable of doing the job at potentially a much cheaper cost, even though it's a higher hourly rate, because they don't have to fumble through or go through more hourly investigation to put together the proper documents. The next question concerning the Hawkins, Delafield, and Wood firm is travel. Will we be incurring the cost of travel and lodging, or would we just be incurring a cost since they have an office in Sacramento, just as BBK would charge us their travel from Sacramento? What would be the difference in travel cost?
There would be travel costs for Mr. Peterson if needed to come to California. Much of the work would be able to be done through electronically and through the phone, but there would be the need for some face-to-face meetings, and you would pay for that.
Just the travel.
And if the travel necessitated an overnight stay, then you would have that as well. To compare that, though, the Best and Krieger proposal, though, the listed 5 attorneys on their, or 6 attorneys on their team, 5 of those attorneys are in San Diego. So you would have a similar issue with BB&K. When you needed FaceTime with those attorneys, you would have travel costs to and from San Diego.
And that's a much cheaper cost.
Much cheaper
travel
and
cost between New York
absolutely.
And California.
Absolutely.
Sacramento. Also depending on what class you fly to. So there is a difference, but that is minor, but it is a cost. Availability, since they will be in New York and there is a time difference, will we have less availability or the same availability?
Hard to say. I guess all I could say to that, Director Souza, is this guy, Mr. Peterson's very excited about this project. Hopes you guys retain his firm. And I shouldn't say my suspicion, but I guess that's what it is that for a project of this interest and magnitude, that the attorney will find the time to provide excellent service to the agency.
Just a note, I have 2 extra rooms in my house if we need to actually rent them out.
I will pass that along.
That's right. Not as much as Hyatt Place or anything.
You serve breakfast?
Yes, it is a bed and breakfast.
Any other questions?
No, sir.
Steve? How confident are you and West Yost that we're going to be looking at design build or design build operate in this process as opposed to a bid?
I would view it as highly likely.
You concur? And in the DB versus DBO process, how would you classify the percent at the present that we would be going with DBO versus DB?
At least for the water treatment plant part, again, highly likely. And the reason being is unlike some of the other, when you establish cities that have big utility departments, you have no utility staff that could step in and operate a plant of this magnitude from day one. And so the choice of having to quickly, employ adequate staff to take over a plant of that magnitude, the day after completion of construction, is a huge employment endeavor.
Okay.
And the thought is you can slide into that much easier with a DBO approach, where the contractor's operating the plant for a period of time, and then that gives the agency the opportunity then kind of ramp up to have employed staff eventually take over that plant.
Next question, I know you indicated you had six proposals?
8.
8 proposals. We, of course, have this letter from BBK, which is kind of directing the conversation. Where was BBK in your assessment compared to the firm that you're recommending?
Frankly, it was like 4th or 5th.
Okay.
I mean, if I was to recommend a second firm to you, it probably would not have been Best and Krieger.
And well, I think that's all the questions I have right now. Let's go ahead.
Chair Marble, could I do a follow-up on that last question?
Yeah.
Would that be based upon experience?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and thank you for that. I don't want to, there were some things in the Best and Krieger letter that were suggesting that somehow they're unqualified. It's an excellent firm that does excellent government work throughout the state of California. They've done lots and lots of public works jobs in this state, but just on balance, for this type of work, this New York firm just has done substantial more than they have. That's the reason for the recommendation.
Okay. This is, I don't know where we get into closed session on a discussion of this kind and how much open session, but
We really don't. This is not a closed session item.
so I think at this point, Best wanted to make a comment on this agenda item, and let's go ahead and have you come on forward. Then we'll bring it back to the.
Good afternoon, directors. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. I just wanted to follow up briefly on the comment letter we submitted yesterday, and it sounds like you all received it and had a chance to look at it. And just hopefully by my presence, unfortunately, some of the other partners on the proposal were unable to be here today, but just reemphasize and express our continued interest in potentially assisting the agency with its upcoming, exciting, and unique projects that you have. And just reemphasize what was in the letter with regard to our confidence that if given the opportunity, we would be more than competent in being able to provide you with the high-quality legal services that you would need for any of the delivery methods that you might choose on this project. And other than that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. And then last but certainly not least, just emphasize again with regard to our interest. Certainly, we'd hope that if you don't make the decision not to choose us on this, that you keep us in mind for your future projects.
Can you address 2 quick questions and then we'll let any questions come forward. Number 1, your experience with design build versus design build operate, and your experience in water projects like what we're doing. Could you just address those 2 items for us?
Sure. I certainly did not review the proposal from the other firm, so I can't really get into the comparison that you have, but I'd say that we've been in business across the state for over 100 years. We are doing on a daily basis waterworks projects, school projects, city projects. We're familiar with all the delivery methods. I believe we had some recent design build projects in the proposal that we described, and we have counseled our clients on design build operate in our recent past.
So you've actually done design build operate projects?
I don't recall exactly what we had in our proposal, but I don't believe we have any recent design build operate projects. To be honest with you, I would say that I think that the last practical matter that I personally was involved in, the decision was made not to go with design build operate, although it was obviously considered and counseled, and that's the process obviously you folks will go through as you get to the delivery method stage, and you'll have to make a determination which method you're going to go with.
Let's bring it back, Mr. Saylor.
I have a question for Mr. Shanahan as well as, I've forgotten your name already.
Tyree Dorward.
Okay, so my question is, there was a comment made that the firm from New York has experience in water intake with design build, and that's very different from school or other sorts of projects such as the ones identified in your proposal. What are the differences beyond the obvious of one is water and the other is children? What are the differences between those kinds of projects when we're talking about creating construction documents that create design build or design build operate?
Well, I think that you just probably hit the nail on the head in terms of drafting the contract documents. You have a whole different set of factors impacting your construction for a water project and a water intake project versus a school or a city hall or a convention center or a rail project. So the factual differences would, I think, would be the biggest ones in terms of drafting the contracts. Contract documents themselves, including design build and design build operate, are going to focus on construction risk transfer. Obviously, with design build and design build operate, you are going to be trying to make sure that you are contractually transferring the risk of delays, overruns in budget, and other construction risks to whoever the contracting entity is.
Will that differ depending on the type of project?
Oh, I'm sure that would absolutely differ depending on the types of projects that you guys have on your project list, and then obviously which of those two methods you go with. If you do design, build, operate, you're obviously going to be talking about
I mean between schools versus highways versus water projects versus airports.
the specific. I think what varies most is the factually specific stuff that will relate to the construction risks in the project. And I think your risks are obviously primarily completion on time and within budget, cost overruns and delays. I think most public entities across the board are going to be focused on making sure that the project is delivered on time and within your cost allowance, grant funding, whatever the funding source may be. And those are the specifics you'll be addressing in the contract documents to making sure that the risk is appropriately apportioned.
So Mr. Shanahan, how significant is the difference of the project scope versus the details of the contract documents? Why is it a big deal that a firm would have experience in schools with design build and that wouldn't be transferable?
I would, in addition to what was said, I would add two points. One is the permitting of a water intake project is hugely problematic, and it's going to be very difficult to line up all the federal and state permits for a new intake on the Sacramento River. That permitting challenge, risk, uncertainty relates closely to selection of a construction method and the interplay between the risk of permitting and the timing of permitting as compared against the methodology of the contracting method and how that relates to project schedule is huge. Then the second component is constructing in the river is a huge risk. We will probably need to build I shouldn't say I'm not going to do it. The agency will need to build a large cofferdam to hold back the Sacramento River for a period of time while you work in the riverbed. And that's going to be a huge challenge for a contractor. A lot of risk gets assigned to that, and that affects the nature of the work, the nature of the contract documents, the nature of the assignment of the risk. And it may well be that, for example, that DBO makes sense for certain parts of the project, but maybe because of what I just said, it doesn't make sense for an intake project because the risks and the uncertainties with that piece of your project are different. And it's that area that you really need some good advice on from somebody who's who's done that and maybe is familiar with some of those risks. I know a little bit to it. I sort of assess the risk, but I've never had a client build an intake project, so I don't feel qualified to fully assess that. But those are kind of the two additional things I would say that make this water project unique to a school or a hospital.
Thank you.
Stody?
You mentioned the permitting process. I would think, I don't like to make an obvious statement, but I would think we're not proceeding with any construction until the permitting process is done. So I'm missing the connection between permitting the structure and getting environmental clearances and doing what's basically a composition of bid documents and assignment of risk.
It relates in large part to schedule and design, because a lot of these things happen concurrently while you're pursuing additional environmental review on an intake and permit and Endangered Species Act clearance. You concurrently will be doing some beginning level of design, 30-50% design, 70%, and how those things, how those pieces of your overall project mesh together for the maximum advantage and efficiency to the agency and to produce the most cost-effective solution. That's sort of the challenge, is putting those pieces of the puzzle together that in large part are going to be done. There are going to be many concurrent moving pieces. And the decision on design build or design build operate affects the level and timing of the design undertaken by the engineers.
Okay, the second question was something you mentioned earlier.
Why don't we just keep our questions to
Oh, I'm sorry.
BBK, and then we'll bring it back
Okay,
and let
sorry.
him sit down,
All right.
if that's okay.
Yep.
Thank you again for the opportunity.
Yep,
Oh.
just a second.
Sorry.
Okay, I have one final question for you. Why would we want to select your firm instead of the recommendation of Mr. Shanahan?
I think that the benefits to you are mostly what we highlighted in the letter. I think we're one of the premier public works practice groups in the state within BB&K. The firm's been in business in California for over 100 years. I certainly think that, like I said, we could more than competently provide you with cost-effective, local, high-quality legal services for any of the projects that you might be considering.
Do you feel you can save us money in this project compared to the other firm, or is that an unknown in your mind?
I would say that it's an unknown, but I would say potentially.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions of Mr. Shanahan from the group? Marty, I know you did.
Thank you. That was something else you mentioned earlier about your function in this relationship, if we went with Hawkins, would be oversight of what they were doing, and also, I guess, familiarizing yourself with the documents they were, review of the documents, so that you would feel comfortable recommending that to us. And I'm wondering if that's the, I mean, not to sound flippant, but why do we need them if you can do that?
Because I don't have the level of experience that Hawkins Delafield has, because my firm does not have the stock sample agreements and samples on the shelf, and because we lack the experience in negotiating a kind of transaction with the kind of very large contractors that do this type of work. So again, it's all the same reasons that I'm recommending Hawkins Delafield. They have the substantial experience. I don't. What I do have experience in is I've been doing California public works contracting work since 1983, so I'm very familiar with the requirements of the public contract code and the labor code, and it's those issues that Mr. Peterson would lean on me to make sure that what he's recommending meets our public contract code and our labor code, and I feel very confident being able to review from that level and say, yes, these documents are good as to form.
Okay.
Any further questions? Bring it back for comments from board members. Why don't we go with you first? Mr. Souza?
Chairman Marble, I'm very familiar with Best and Krieger's law firm. They actually serve as the attorney to Cal LAFCO. And in fact, I've had meetings in their San Diego and their Sacramento office. And we have a member of Davis, the mayor's daughter actually works in the firm. So there's a familiarity. But in this particular case, that familiarity cannot be is subservient to experience here. I want a firm that I know knows what they're doing, has done it many times over, that can give us the best advice, the best documents as we approach this very expensive project, and a few $1,000s here or there is not enough savings for me to not go with a firm that has completed 16 projects in California, 10 of them in the water field, and I want that assurances to the ratepayers that I am here representing, that they are going to get the best bang for their buck in the best project that we can produce.
Ms. Doty?
No, you go.
Well, I think those are compelling arguments, and I'm inclined to agree, but I think in general, I would prefer that the firm be local. And this is not only not local, but it's a long ways away, and it's much more expensive. I'm not convinced that what we're doing is demands the level of expertise that we're describing. It seems to me that there is a level that can be attained that's competent and adequate and sufficient when I think our ratepayers are being asked to spend more money than we need to deliver that. So I'll support the board action, but I have strong reservations about the recommendation.
Stody?
Yeah, I have some similar concerns about the remoteness of the firm, understanding that basically, well, if I remember, you said that probably a lot of this would be handled electronically. And several times the reference has been to their stock of on-the-shelf documents. I would rather go with the local firm. Not only is their rate higher, but then we're adding an additional rate on that, plus travel, plus perhaps staying here. I'm somewhat on the Mayor Pro Tem's position too, that I don't know if this project requires the level of expertise that they demonstrate in these other projects. I'm not sure I have that confidence that it's substantially so different from BB&K that it's a clear cut with the other things that are in place. So I'll support the board action also, but I have reservations about going outside of the state and not using somebody who is more local.
What is the timetable that you would need a decision from this board?
There may be others in the room that are equipped to answer that. I think we've got some flexibility. If the board wanted to wait a month and hold us over and make a decision at your next meeting, I think that's okay. I'm looking around the technical committee and they're nodding their heads. So I think you've got a month if you wanted to wait. Much of this work will be in the next fiscal year.
How would the board feel about taking a month and
Good.
having an opportunity to interact individually with either Mr. Shanahan or with Best and Don?
I think that I'm interested in the rest of the story that Mr. Shanahan referred to, that the other firms that were evaluated, there was second, third, fourth, and so forth, and it would be interesting to know if we wanted to stay at a lower price with a local firm that was competent, what would your recommendation be? I'd appreciate knowing that as well, but because it may not, we're presented today with this choice of two, and that may not be the choice that we should be considering.
And that's a good question, and I very much struggled with this particular recommendation. I work closely with the technical committee and the engineers because I too had a strong preference of a California lawyer. My number two recommendation was a Sacramento field firm, Murphy Austin. They have done substantial construction work. They serve as construction counsel to several of my local government agency clients, and they have recently represented the city of Stockton on its new, Stockton has a new water intake treatment project that just started construction within the past year, and they are special counsel to Stockton on that project. So that would probably be my number two recommendation.
Who did Freeport? Who did the project of Freeport?
That was a
Who did
traditional
the
design
legal?
bid. Wasn't it? Yeah, that was a traditional design bid project, and it was handled, I believe, by the county counsel's office.
Okay.
Chair Marvel?
Yes.
I too would like to actually have this delayed a little bit because I'm not certain if, I mean, you're making statements, two members of this board have made statements that, and I had made a statement, I think it's going to cost more. Do we know that for certain? It could cost less. We don't know for certain. I mean, we're making supposition based upon numbers we don't have in front of us. And I have concerns that we do have a subcontractor role that will add some cost, that there will be some travel, but if you already have existing documents that you don't need to write, that's costs that don't have to be incurred. So we may actually see that to go with the Mr. Peterson will cost us less, not more, but we don't know that. And so I would prefer to have that breakdown on what are we talking about? What cost is your role going to add to it? What availability will this firm have? Remember, this is the 21st century. You don't need to be here in order to communicate. In fact, I think we're all looking at means of communicating that doesn't have to involve travel. That we can do that as a species now. So I think that that is not as great a concern to me as it might have been in the 20th century. But there are certain aspects of Hawkins, Delafield, and Wood that I'm concerned about. But there are aspects of Best, and Krieger that I'm concerned about. So I'm not really, I'm not ready to make a decision here today. And I would actually also like to see your second choice.
Okay.
I mean, if that second choice is far superior to Best, and Krieger, and it's a Sacramento firm, well, that's a no-brainer to me. You pick the local firm if we're going to go after it that has the experience.
Right.
And frankly, the reason I didn't, probably the principal reason I didn't recommend the number 2 firm was, they've not done any design, build, operate. And that's just a different animal. And you heard the attorney from Best, and Krieger acknowledge they've not done much design, build, operate. There's just not much of that that's done in California. And you add that O component, and that just changes the nature of the transaction significantly. And I wanted to bring to this board somebody familiar with that O part of the project, because that may very well be where we're heading for this project.
Mr. Chair? I'd like a little more information too, and especially I'd like to have maybe just a brief summary of how successfully completed all these projects. Were they on time with the contracts? And I'd like that actually for any of your recommendations.
Yeah, I don't know if that has to do with the attorney so much as the contractor,
No,
but
I mean the attorney portion of the contract.
yeah. Greg?
Yes, I'd like to point out that when we're looking at the cost of putting together the contract in a DB or DBO project, the detail and quality of the building of the contract document and the presentation of the document is what really makes the difference in the long term of that project. So yes, you may get a document for cheaper, but over the life of the project itself, the more detailed the document that has all the stuff that they've already gone through worked into it is going to be by far the cheaper document to go with. The other point was you were asking about some of the differences between a water project. One of the things that the water projects bring to the table that are not in other construction projects are the technical performance standards that go along with a water treatment plant and conveyance system. And knowing how to work those into a contractual document and being able to present a contract document that covers that whole gamut of the DBO contract is essential to having a good, viable project. And quite frankly, the contract document is what makes DBO work. With a traditional design bid build, you have room during the contract to make the changes. In a DBO, the more work and effort and the quality that you put up front, the better, more money you're going to save, and the better project you get at the end. Thank you.
I'd like to make a suggestion to the board, and that would be to appoint a subcommittee of 2. Mr. Souza would chair the committee, and one of the 2 of you could serve on the committee and look at each of the proposals, dissect them a little bit, to come back. I think it's a big enough decision that we'd be a little more comfortable doing that.
I'll volunteer.
Yeah,
Would you like to do that, Marty?
Yeah, I'll volunteer
Okay.
for that.
So I'll make a motion then that we appoint a subcommittee composed of Mr. Souza as chair and Ms. Doty.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Very good. I will follow up with the committee.
Great. It's not a huge.
Very
contract.
good. Item 6C.
6C. What's 6C?
This is also my item. I should state, though, that on this item, I am coming to you as a shareholder of Barkowitz, Chronic, and Shanahan. I am not talking to you as your general counsel. When the agency started up back in October, there was a slew of people, including myself, that were helping the Joint Powers Authority get organized and started up. And from day one, we recognized you would need a general counsel. And so at that meeting, the board was kind enough to appoint me and my firm as general counsel. My partner, Alan Lilly, also works on this for this client, handling the water rights and permit-related matters. Because we were new and the agency was new, we didn't want to, lock in any long-term relationships. So all the contracts we've done back in October and the short ones, they've all been short-term contracts. I just wanted to bring to the board's attention that our contract expires, and there's an error in my staff report. I apologize for that. Our contract expires June 30, 2010. I think the staff report talks about 2011. And so between now and the end of June, the board needs to decide what to do with general counsel. I've got in there what I view as the options to either extend our contract or to solicit proposals from other law firms for general counsel services, or when you're hiring lawyers, you don't need to go out for RFPs or bids. You can do a sole source selection if there's another firm the agency would like to retain. So I just wanted to bring that matter to you. It's now April. Our preference, of course, would be that we'd love to keep working with the agency and request that you extend our contract, but obviously you've got these other options available to you, and just really wanted to bring this matter to your attention so you can start talking and thinking about how to move forward. And frankly, for this one, unlike when you're hiring construction counsel for special services, for this one I serve as general counsel, sort of an officer, not sort of an officer to the board. For this one, you could meet in closed session if the board wished. It's not scheduled for closed session at this meeting, but if you wanted to schedule a closed session to talk about this at a subsequent meeting, that's also an option to consider.
Okay, comments? Vice Chair Souza?
Chair Marble, I've actually been very happy with Mr. Shanahan's services, and at this point, I would say there's no need to change law firms.
Ms. Doty?
I concur. I'm very happy with the services both he and his associate have provided. And under the list of proposals, I really, really, really do not like sole source selection. So I'm happy to continue his service.
Mr. Saylor?
Can I make a motion
Yes.
that we extend the contract with Barkowitz, Chronic, and Shanahan for general counsel services, and provide that the agreement may be terminated by the agency board at any time upon providing written notice to the firm?
I'll second that.
Discussion? Is the extension for a fixed term,
No.
just indefinite?
With the provision that it can be terminated upon written notice at any time.
At will employment.
Oh, I've got it. Okay. I was looking at a date and it's not in there. Okay, sure.
Any other discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Well, thank you for that vote of confidence.
Thank you for the service you have, and your associates who have done a great deal of work over the years.
I should probably add in that Alan's my partner, but just don't want that to get into the record. He'd get very upset with me.
Trying to think of some sort of water comeback, but I won't.
You're dry right now.
That's right, it's a dry well.
Dry well.
Okay, item 7. Paul.
Thank you, Chairperson Marble, members of the board. I hope and trust that this is a routine item. It represents the second quarterly report of your treasurer auditor as a requirement when the JPA was established, and the board appointed myself as treasurer. There's a requirement that we report in writing on at least a quarterly basis as to the status of the condition of the authority funds and receipts, deposits, and expenditures. You did receive a first quarter report, I believe, in January. It was on your consent calendar, and I was not able to be here at that meeting. And in the future, of course, it's up to the board, but I envision these reports returning to the consent calendar. I just wanted to be able to introduce the item and speak to it, and potentially solicit any feedback that the board might have as to how the report is presented and the content and level of detail that would better serve the needs of the board. As to the substance of the report, again, this is reports the activities of the authority through March 31st, and you have initially, or at this point, approved a budget totaling about $1,975,000 for this fiscal year, and we have also gotten authority to fund the authority budget through contributions from the participating agencies totaling $2 million. To date, funding contributions of $1,447,500 have actually been collected. We're in the process of invoicing the participating agencies for the balance of their contributions for this fiscal year. That's in process. Through March 31st, we had expended $861,162 in paid invoices. We have outstanding commitments in excess of $714,000, all consistent with the authority provided and the actions provided to date by the board. I should say of that amount, we have, we're also in process of paying another $119,000 of invoices that were received for work done prior to March 31st, but those payments are actually in process. And as of the writing of this report, the agency had a current fund balance of about $583,000. The report, as you'd seen before, is sort of presented. I think I identified two pieces. There's actually three pieces to this report. The first attachment's essentially a kind of a revenue and expenditure format that would provide for each quarter and then year to date what our totals are relative to the budget. The second part of the report has been prepared to essentially provide the statement of fund balance for the agency. And there's a third section that I think may be useful, which would each quarter just present actions that the board has taken that impact the budget and the spending authority that the agency has authorized. You note that there is not a line item detailed transaction presentation. However, obviously that information is available, and so going forward, we'd be more than happy to continue providing this template or this format, but also we'd be interested in any feedback that the board might have so that the report meets your needs. And with that, it's an informational item.
Questions from any board members? I'm comfortable with the report. Everybody else?
Yep.
Okay, all right.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
One question. Just a quick question. The 586 fund balance, that does not include the commitments, I'm assuming?
Correct. That is just a cash balance. The
Okay.
uncommitted would be on your revenue and expenditure report. You'll see the very last column will be a variance between your budget and what you've either spent or authorized.
So currently, we're 356,000 under budget, right?
It doesn't, I
Well,
believe
as
because
of-
it's a full year that you put in the budget,
Okay.
it's just showing what's left.
That's where you would find that. If I understood your question correctly, in terms of the report, the difference between what has been committed and expended, the difference is, and let me clarify this, the difference is that there are certain agreements, particularly some of the ones that we just talked about, where the agency will have authorized a contract or an expenditure but may not have a dollar amount. So what I think what's missing in this report, and I'm not sure a good way to put it in there, is the anticipated expenditures, for instance, for even secretarial services and the one you'll do for treasurer services, where you're kind of on an hourly basis, on a reimbursement basis. There's an amount budgeted, but you're not actually encumbering the entire amount of the funds at the beginning of the fiscal year. So it would actually be misleading to suggest that based on what commitments have formally been made, that the authority has another $350,000 to spend because work that is going on and work that has been authorized could very well utilize those funds. But we can clarify that.
Yeah, could you
for
show them as like an account payable or something?
Excuse me?
Could you show them as like an account payable?
What you would typically see is the expenditures to date and contractual obligations that the authority has entered into when you approve contracts with a specific not-to-exceed amount. But an example would be, had the board taken action to bring on board a construction law firm at an hourly rate without an actual term, we would not be committing any portion of your budget to that activity, but would be tracking the expenditures against your budget, if that
Okay.
helps clarify.
Yeah, I think so. All right, thank you.
Okay, there's an opportunity to have discussion on other statewide water issues. Any staff members have items to bring up here? Any board members have items to bring up here?
Yes, Chair Marble, this was sent to us as a draft piece. My public probably hasn't seen it, but I know most staff and probably all the board members have it. It's very good. It's as somebody who has designed a lot of campaign pieces, this is a very good piece. It may be too fancy for some folks, and that may be the only concern that I have is for some people they may see, well, boy, isn't that awful costly to do something like that? But it is a good informational piece, and I would be I just thought I'd give you my comments and one concern.
Thank you. Greg?
The brochure that you have, we are going to be doing two different copies. One will be a presentation copy that we would use things for legislative, where we're making a presentation to a grant organization, something along the lines of that, and then another copy that would be for general distribution, which would be significantly less than what you see in front of you there.
That addresses
Good.
my concern.
Yeah, thank you. Very good. Monthly engineers report, I think we all have it in front of us and have read it. Let me see if before we have another presentation, let me see if the board has any questions about that report or if we can accept it as it was presented. And I thought it was very thorough, and I don't have any questions. Okay. Very good. Future agenda items. Any board member wish to propose any future items?
I'm interested in having the board at some appropriate time discuss the interactions between this agency and Yolo County's overall water efforts.
You mean the flood control district, or?
There's interest from the county in having greater connection with our project. And I'd be interested in having an actual discussion of what's the most effective way to do that. Is that at the technical committee level? Is it the board to board? Are there some decisions that we want to involve people in? What kind of interactions do we choose to have versus what happens just on a evolution?
We can research that and see what opportunities are available and what avenues are available to do that.
Okay.
So we'll send that, if you're agreeable, we'll send that to technical committee to bring back as a report on.
Yep, that's fine.
Chair Marble?
Yes.
I know you and I both went to the opening of the Freeport intake facility. It was a marvelous facility, and I would, I think we should have some information presented from that facility, how they've gone about producing it in a different fashion, but I think it offers us at least the most recent facility in our area that has been built, that's on the river, that will have some of the same similar concerns that we'll have to address, and I think a lot of that information would be useful to us. So even if it's just a memo or something that gives us that information, I think that to members that didn't go, you and I were able to tour it and hear it and see it. And I think it would be useful to both board members, Saylor and Doty.
Good. We'll make them listen to all 12 speeches that we listened to.
No, I'm sorry, I believe we get the edited version, don't we, the compressed version?
I did,
Yeah.
have a tour of the place about 6 months ago that was fairly lengthy, so please keep that in mind.
Still listen to the speeches.
All right. Yeah, 12 speeches. We both looked at each other and said, we likely won't be around when we dedicate, but we may be, and we certainly hope there are not 12 speeches. Well, no further business then. We'll adjourn the meeting.